So welcome everybody. It's 4:05 Eastern. I'll just say, to kick things off, thank you all for taking time out of your day and being part of our sort of thought leadership series, our speaker series, whatever you want to call it, or webinar. I was very fortunate to meet Adrian. I guess a few weeks ago, just by coincidence, he had said a few things on LinkedIn that caught my attention, so I sort of connected with him and asked him some questions about it, and now he's got a great story to tell, and I don't want to try and tell it for him. So I think maybe I'll just start off, maybe Adrian, with an introduction, and maybe have you tell us a little bit about your background, and then what led you to Fitzrovia, and then we'll just sort of go from there.
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for joining. So my background, Canadian born and raised, very, very proud to be Canadian, especially this day and age. I graduated from University of Western Ontario, the business school in early 2000s. I started off on an essentially Wall Street, Credit Suisse, First Boston, doing mergers and acquisitions for 4 years, 2 years in Toronto, then 2 years in London, England. I then joined a real estate private equity firm called Apollo in 2006. I was there for about 5 years in total. I was investing as far east as Russia, down to Turkey. I did multifamily in Germany. I did condos in London, light industrial and office in Switzerland and Ukraine, of all places. I then came back in 2013 to join Tricon Capital. I had my baby daughter in London. The intention going to London was to always be there for 1 to 2 years max. I stayed 7, and it was time to come back home and raise a family. I don't think there's a better place on the planet than Canada, specifically Toronto, to raise a family. My social network's here, my family's here. So we came back. And I joined Tricon. At Tricon, I started their purpose-built rental division in Canada from scratch. So built up the development management team, the asset management team. We had about $500 million in development, so 3 towers in total. And then manufactured housing in the US. I started and ran that platform for them, and then sold that business to Blackstone after 18 months. We grew it to about $200 million of gross asset value. Really fell in love with the purpose-built rental sector for a bunch of reasons. I saw a lot of institutional capital coming into the sector. Very few, if not, I would say, there's no one I could really point to that was fully vertically integrated that could cater to that capital. And so I also thought there's potentially an opportunity to bring a US-centric operating model up to Canada that was focused on craftsmanship, on high-quality design, but more importantly, really strong customer service. And we could marry up, what makes the hotel business really successful to what I believe was lacking in the multifamily space to the Canadian market. And at the time, I used to hear about it all the time that Canadians are not like Americans, which they are absolutely not. I'll make that emphatic statement today, to no one's surprise, especially today. But I just viewed the asset class or the concept no different than anyone wanting to stay in a really nice hotel. When they come through the front door, what does that front door experience look like? How can we animate that first impression, that experience? How do we create a strong sense of community, especially with an immigration-driven story where many people living in, especially new purposeful rental, are new immigrants to Canada. They have generally a high propensity to rent. So how do we create that Canadian identity, that community identity, those strong relationships to make it a really fruitful experience, and we could create brand equity over time. So I ended up starting Fitzrovia in 2017. We would be Canada's largest purpose-built rental developer today. I don't know anyone that's developing more rental than we are across the country. We have about 9,000 units under management, most of which is under development. Active towers in construction are about 15 in total right now, and we are principally headquartered in Toronto, but also have an office in Montreal. The intention was to always be vertically integrated, We are a vertically integrated developer operator. So we have about 400 people on the team. We develop, construct, asset, property manage entirely in-house. We don't rely on any third parties to do that work. And we go more downstream than a traditional kind of vertically integrated operator developer. And what do I mean by that? We run our own school that plugs into our young family buildings. We'll be one of the largest private school operators in the city. In the next 5 years, we'll have 6 schools that open up. We run all our food and beverage concepts in our lobbies. It's really a hotel like lobby bar. It's called Number 10 Dean. It just got named the number 2 coolest coffee shops in the city by the Food Network, which we're really proud about. And then the third is a healthcare partnership that we have with Cleveland Clinic, where all of our on-site residents, if they're feeling sick, they go down to the Cleveland Clinic room. There's on-site diagnostic equipment. There's cameras that look down their throat, and they can get access to Cleveland Clinic nurses, practitioners, or doctors within 2 minutes of using the service. So we're really, really proud of that. And about 25% of our residents have used that service in the last 12 months. We do 5 principal strategies. Our develop the core, call it our Class A strategy, which is the most of the cranes you'll see around the city of Toronto, is called the Fitzrovia Collection. The second strategy is called Maddox. So we also buy vintage properties that we reposition over time. So that's 1950s, 60s, mid 1970s product. And that's more of a heavy refurbishment program. The third strategy is under a banner called Loxley, and that's more of a core plus strategy where we will buy 5 to 10-year-old properties that we likely refurbish over time. That's most of which is concentrated in Montreal. We do have one asset in Toronto. And then student housing would be our 4th vertical. We had a very successful student housing deal right across from the University of Toronto called the Waverley, and we are rolling out a student housing brand in 5 core student housing markets within a 2-hour drive of Toronto. That's London, Kitchener, Waterloo, Guelph, Hamilton, and Kingston. And then lastly, we have an affordable rental development strategy that we are rolling out. It's under a social impact strategy. We have done some affordable built-to-core rental, but we want to roll that out more programmatically. Our view is we have to be part of the affordable solution. We can't just be developing, call it Class A properties. We have to be across the spectrum, and we have the right cost of capital and the right capital structure to get involved in that strategy. We're really excited about being, one of the larger, private affordable housing developers in this country.
Wow. So, okay, there's so many things here, and I want to circle back on a couple of things that you said, and then I want to ask you a couple more questions. And then Amber, just as a point of order, if anybody has any questions, right, just throw it in the chat or put your hand up. Adrian has got this. He can speak to anything, I'm sure, on the fly if he needed to. But so I just want to point out for the group here. So Fitzrovia is like exclusively rental housing, right? Like that's my read on this. You don't do any other sort of okay. So maybe if we just sort of get back to basics a little bit here and just sort of say like what you clearly see long-term potential in this, right? Because you got all your eggs in this basket. But what excites you about rental? Of all the things that you're hugely successful, you got all these great projects under development. Why just rental?
Yeah, what I'm really passionate about is eliminating the stigma. Generally, I would still say there's a negative stigma, although that is changing, and hopefully we're part of that change around what it means to rent. My time over in Europe, most people rented their primary home versus bought. And so when I came back here, it's, that was almost the opposite. And so, that would be one. But the second component is really changing the asset class. So we talk about, the negative stigma or the stigma around renting. I think there's a better way to deliver this product, right? It's really marrying what has been very successful in the hotel space, have really strong craftsmanship, premier amenities, really animate your front door experience, train your on-site staff. We have a partnership with Disney. We have a partnership with the Ritz-Carlton. All of our on-site staff get trained by those 2 great organizations. And then we actively program those amenities to get people to use it, create that strong sense of community. So what do I mean by that? We basically have a full-time lifestyle manager. We'll do 1 to 2 events per building per week. So it's a very active social calendar. and we're leveraging our corporate partnerships to create really unique experiences. So, that's really the holistic plan. And I'm just really excited about continuing to grow, that side of our business. And we talk about our assets in generations. We have our first generation assets, which we're really proud of, and we think that was a big step change in the market. But as we're opening up Elm Ledbury, which is a second generation asset, we learned a lot, and we definitely are enhancing, the full offering across the board. But then when you go to Sloan, which is a Yorkdale property, and Bloor Dufferin, which is going to be opening up in about a year's time, those are big step ups to Elm and Ledbury. And so we want to continue to be on the leading edge around innovation and changing the optics around this asset class.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it makes me think of, Anthony's got a question, and I'll comment. Anthony, go for it. See what you got.
There we go. Thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've got three very different questions. I hope it's okay. I can ask all of them.
Go for it.
Curious, just seeing the landscape of the country, where you see opportunities, what markets the most challenging, which markets you like the most. Curious, as you look at the vertical integration, doing so many different vertical integrations, where do you decide to say, or how do you, I guess, stay true to like a core competitive advantage if you're doing this vertical integration in so many different facets? How do you decide, okay, maybe this is too much?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with the second question first, and then roll into markets that we quite like, because I think it's an important question. From the outside looking in, the vertical integration could seem to be complicated. The benefits around that, once you have your systems and processes put up, and you actually have very high quality people running those, what we call service verticals, is it makes you a much better owner operator, much better, right? So when you're designing a building or you're constructing a building, you are getting a constant feedback loop from your maintenance technicians and maintenance supervisors and property managers. So what's working, what's not working, what's resonating with the end consumer, your resident profile, what's not. And so you're constantly updating and improving what we'd say is our end product. So I would say there's a big advantage there. Now, if we were more of a generalist operator, and what do I mean by that? If we did things that were not thematic, so that means we were an office developer and operator. We also did retail. We did industrial, where there's a lot of real estate platforms in Canada that will do a whole host of things that are really not interconnected. We would lose our competitive advantage because we do only one thing. We don't do any for sale housing. We just specialize in being a residential rental developer operator. It allows us to specialize and go deep on the product and have a strong competitive advantage in doing so. It also allows us to create owner-driven economics where everyone on our team feels a very cohesive approach to building one of our buildings. We're working together, we're rowing in the same direction to create the best quality product as quickly as possible and as cost effectively as possible. That in itself gives us a big advantage. As it relates to markets that we really like, I'll stay away from the markets that maybe we're a little bearish on. I'll just more focus on the positive side. We're very bullish on Montreal. We like the macroeconomic story there. We also think our product lends itself really well in a city like Montreal. It's a city that really speaks to me, and we're really passionate about being involved in that city and kind of eventually developing in the Montreal market. Right now, it's really going to be a value add or vintage and Loxley strategy. So Maddox and Loxley strategy. Development in a new market is tricky. We want to be true to our core competency, which is being a local developer that's leveraging our local team. As soon as you get into a brand new jurisdiction, developing makes it a lot more complicated and more risky. So what we want to do is really get strong boots on the ground, invest in our infrastructure, and then eventually develop. That could be vertically integrated development. It could be in conjunction with a local GC. It's something we're still trying to figure out. And then we want to be the preeminent national players. And so we want to be out west. So that's Calgary and or Vancouver in the next 2 to 3 years. We'd like to set up shop. And so that would be starting with an IPP income producing approach. So that's value add and core plus. And then eventually, similar to Montreal, once our infrastructure is set up, we'd like to develop. And that could be in conjunction with a local GC, or it could be fully vertically integrated ourselves. We think the macroeconomic story in Canada, tariffs aside, will continue to be very strong. We're very undersupplied across the board. When you look at the immigration-driven story, even as you're tempering, the government has tempered immigration. We're still at very robust numbers. We're simply not creating enough housing. And on top of that, we don't have the environment today where it makes sense to get a whole host of new supply coming into the market. Because of our vertical integration, it allows us to construct more cost competitively and allows us to go vertical in the market like today, where most other developers can't make sense of those returns. Does that make sense, Anthony?
Yeah, it does. And I just had one follow-up question in terms of the disposition and the life cycle. Do you guys have like a target for life cycle, or these long-term holds? How do you kind of evaluate that?
Yeah, great question. We are not a merchant build developer. It's all, we talk about these big 30-year holds. So it's a develop to core strategy. We are a long-term neighbor. We're a long-term, piece of the local fabric of any neighborhood that we develop in. And so these are all long-term holds on our balance sheet alongside our institutional capital partners.
That's great. Thank you.
Awesome. So this is it's great. I had lots of ideas going in my head, and I'm just going to avoid the trap that you said about breaking the tariff ice. But I just want to ask one thing, because I know that you touched on it, and I just want to make sure that everybody hears it, because I stumbled on it when I was talking to one of your employees about it. So Fitzrovia collection communities include I think it's called the Bloomsbury Academy, right? It's like a ECE education initiative. So
that's right. Yes.
What like, of all the things, why ECE? Why in this space? And then, like, what's the thinking there? Like, is that speaking to the demographic that you have in the building, or the one you're attracting, or the ones that, like, walk me through that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's exactly the answer. So we get this question quite a bit. The short answer is, but those are not, I'd say, arguably great businesses to be in. We are not doing it for profit or for margin. It is a for-profit platform, but the reason why we're in it is because we saw a pressing need for our residents to have this service. And so if you're going to cater to young families, we also cater to downsizers, but specifically the young families, schools are at their capacity downtown, right? If there's such a strain on infrastructure, and I'd say the quality in education is also under strain as well. And so we felt that there was, if we wanted to create a best-in-class experience for our residents, and especially go after a lot of young families that were being alienated from the high-rise market, especially condo developers were not catering to young families, we had to figure out the on-site school solution. And so we looked at partnering with other school providers, couldn't find the right provider, anyone that's interacting with our residents, no different than why we're in the food and beverage business. We really want to control that experience. And so we have found a really good head of school, a fantastic head of school. Her name is Tara Silver from the Linden School, and we really built a business around her. So that's why we got into the Bloomsbury Academy, and similarly, that's why we got into food and beverage with Ted Dean.
Oh, it's incredible, right? Like, you got F&B, you got the Cleveland Clinic, that sort of innovation. You got the ECE sort of communities. This is huge. And then you wrap that around sort of design and history and some cachet, a bespoke hospitality, clearly, and then that sort of unique lifestyle amenity. So I see why, like, very quickly, why you're a standout in Toronto and Montreal. Totally get it. Makes a lot of sense. Now, is that reflected in your market pricing on your rent, or what? I'll put you on the spot a little bit.
Yeah, we think I think the value proposition, we always talk about, what is the underlying value of the rents that we have on our properties, and we think it's cost effective when you include all the things that you get with it. It would be on the higher end if you look at face rates, but if you look at the underlying value that you get with leasing in one of our buildings, we think it's very cost effective relative to other competitors in the market.
Sure. I mean, this is the financial literacy sort of debate we see in the market all the time, right? Where people have income to spend on rent or whatever, but they don't have assets to spend on a down payment. So you're sort of marrying the two, where just because you're making a decision to do one, it doesn't make it a lesser quality experience. In fact, I actually hear the counter argument in your voice that you're sort of getting the best of all worlds by taking this approach. So it makes a lot of sense. So we're at 4:25. I don't know if anyone has any other questions, but what I would like to, and what's sort of burning in my mind, and why I sort of reached out to you to begin with is Adrian had done a speech on sort of how Canada isn't building enough housing overall. So this was a few months ago. I think it's still true, especially rental housing, right? There isn't enough to meet demand. So I'm going to turn up the volume on you. So what needs to change? And it doesn't matter to me whether you want to talk government policy, if you want to talk about regulations or even industry practices, because I think there's opportunities for efficiency there. But you got the mic. So what's got to change? What do we got to do?
Yeah, we got to change the economic model, right? So because we're vertically integrated, we are able to go vertical to develop in this market. But if you want to unlock a significant amount of new supply, and we're essentially getting into a period of time where there could be 3 years of effectively no new supply, right? Which is unprecedented in a growing population that we have. And so that worries me. And we've had a lot of great private to public engagement where all three levels of government have reached out. Where we are struggling is immediate, bold leadership and action around introducing new policy. So the HST waiver was very effective, but that got completely neutralized with rising interest rates and other kind of issues that have happened, right? We really need even a short window to get as much new supply into the market with incentives. And what do I mean by that? There's only a couple levers that we really have. One would be all the municipal fees and government levies that we have, which is about 30% of our total development costs, right? We've got to eliminate those, right? And so, by eliminating those, we could unleash a lot of new supply into the market. Have a sunset. If people don't put a shovel in the ground within 18 months, because it's going to take time to actually fully design their buildings, then remove it. Right? Then they're not serious about developing. But I can tell you there's a lot of very serious developers that are sitting on fully entitled parcels that are not going vertical, right? So this is not a conversation around, that'd be more phase two, around the city processing zoning approvals or getting your permits pulled, right? Do I think that system is perfect in the city of Toronto? I don't, but they've made a big culture shift and things are improving there. Maybe some of the technical agreements are still slow and cumbersome, but all intents and purposes, it is a materially better environment to go and get your zoning approvals, and people are actively doing that. But there are millions and millions of square feet of fully zoned, ready to go sites that are not going vertical because the economic model in today's market is broken. It doesn't work. And so we need government help to do that. And that's in the form of a development charge waiver that I've been very vocal on LinkedIn and publicly, and also a 20-year property tax abatement for new construction of rental. If we can do both those things, boy, you can get a lot of new supply in the market. Like we would announce almost right away that we would start in the next 18 months, 4,000 to 5,000 units of new construction. But the reality is it's going to take time to get all three levels of government to coordinate. I'm hoping that's going to happen once you get through these elections. We unfortunately don't have the time to wait, but that's the reality of the situation that we're in right now. And it's going to be a rocky 12 to 18 months. But I'm hoping help will come in due course from the government, and we're going to get really strong, bold leadership and action that's going to change the economic pro forma, the economic model to develop. And at that point, we could worry about phase three. Phase three is how do we get enough skilled labor and change the immigration policy to improve capacity in the system, right? How do we change the funding model around infrastructure? What do I mean by that is I feel like the development charge regime is really archaic. You're basically forcing developers at a much higher cost of capital to fund out the build out of infrastructure. Whereas in the US, they have a very effective tool, which is called an infrastructure bond or municipal bonds, where cities can issue these bonds. They could bring in cheaper forms of capital to finance it. And that really changes the economic model. I think that will take time to introduce and develop. That's not going to happen overnight, but those are really critical phase three items to make sure that we have enough of a runway so we don't have this issue in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a couple of things that you sort of piqued my interest on, but it's fascinating to me. I was speaking at another event last year, and I went after another developer in Toronto, and he had put up a graph basically of the escalation of development charges over the last decade, and it was something like 1,200% increase or something like that in Toronto. So I totally get sort of that pressure that it puts. I worry a little bit, and I'm not overly socialist about this, but I do worry sometimes that we have a tendency, to privatize profits and socialize losses in situations like this, and that we expect the public sector's, social sort of component of it to underwrite the risk to get things going. But I also take the point that, we have a need and we need to fill it, and you can move fast if given the right economic environment to capitalize on it, to get going. But it just seems like it's a bit of a push and pull that, is always going to have resistance, right? So
I would say though, this period of time is really unique and the data says it all,
yeah,
right? When you have an absolute crisis that's happening right now, you can't hide behind,
sure,
the lack of policy. Something has to change. And I can tell you, developers are in the business of developing. We want to develop. They want to develop. Right? It is not a good thing for them to be on the sidelines, but they're forced to because the economic model is broken, right? And it needs to be fixed. And so I've never seen this situation in 11 years of being back in Canada. I've never seen it 20 years overall, except for the financial crisis in 2008 when I was over in Europe. And so it requires a crisis-like action and I'd say bold leadership to fix it, right? You can't just rely on old norms to say it's going to be fixed or there'll be a reversion to mean over time. I think that's when it's too late.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's a valid point, right? Like we can't fix the now, but we can make sure this doesn't happen again, by acting proactively in the space. So does anyone have any other questions for Adrian? Or, I could sit and chat, no problem, but love to see if anybody has any questions. Anthony's back. You can tell Anthony works in the space. All right, come off mute. Let's hear it, Anthony.
I just had a question, two follow-up questions. Curious, just in operations, what you're seeing as the biggest challenge right now, running your rentals, and then curious, selfishly, what your thoughts are on the Ottawa market, because I'm based in Ottawa.
Yeah, I'd say operationally twofold. One is continuing to get really great talent that we could train, right? And so, the type of folks that we want in our team is really customer focused and consumer centric. And so, finding those people across lots of different sectors where we're looking for a certain DNA that we could train and give the TLC that really buys into our program. That would absolutely be any constraint to scaling up, and we need a lot of those people right now. I'd say the flip side is around the revenue line. We're seeing downward pressure on lease velocity and rental rates, which is also impacting the economic model. We believe that that's going to be short-lived, let's say 12 to 18 months. But even if you get a bounce back in rents, and lease velocities, we think the underlying margins are still not sufficient enough, and that's why we're asking for government help. But there's a significant amount of condo inventory that got built or got funded and sold when interest rates were at all-time lows in the middle of COVID, and all that product is hitting the market all in one shot. We have 26,000 units in the city of Toronto that's getting delivered this year, and so that's creating a lot of downward pressure and competition in the market.
Great. And sorry, just your thoughts on the Ottawa market. I don't know if you guys are active here.
We've looked at a couple assets there. It's a market we like. We're going to cover it out of our Montreal office. And so, you know, one of the things that we are looking at is lease velocity specifically. There's a lot of large buildings that are under construction, as you know, Anthony, if you're from Ottawa. And so we believe it's going to take much longer to lease and stabilize those properties. And so does pricing, kind of meet that risk? And that's really what we're thinking throughout the moment right now. But it's a market we like for a number of different reasons. You need long-term patient capital for the Ottawa market. We believe we have that. But it's not a market that we're actively in today, but it's definitely a growth market for us.
Interesting. Thanks.
So I have a question. You spoke a bit before about affordable housing. And I think with the model that you have, obviously it's affordable is that one sort of word that means something different to everyone. And the people that are leasing your spaces have a different idea of what affordability maybe perhaps would be than ones that I manage or somebody else on this call manages. But how do you measure success of a housing project beyond financial returns? And, if do you have any responsibility in providing and addressing the issue of affordable housing?
Yeah, so we're firstly across the spectrum around rents, right? So, with our vintage program as well, we also are developing affordable housing blocks as part of larger master plans. So there's been a very large financial commitment, across a number of projects around the affordable component. 3, we have our social impact strategy that we're very passionate about. And I say this every month. We have, an orientation of all the new hires that have come to Fitzrovia. And I say, if we don't get into affordable housing development where the margins are not there, they're very, very tough. But we're missing the point of this platform, right? We absolutely want to be developing, housing for everyone across the spectrum. That's workforce housing. We'll talk about social housing, which we're going to do through a philanthropic, charitable initiative that we're going to be rolling out over the next, 8 to 12 months. But if someone doesn't understand that, you're really missing the point of the platform. We are absolutely committed to doing that. We believe we have the right ESG related capital to get those projects off the ground. But we're going to have to partner with all 3 levels of government to help us get over that hump. And we feel like we have the model to do it. And then as it relates to building transitionary housing, so I want to stay away from building more shelters. I don't think that's the right economic model. It's about $7,000 a month to operate a shelter per unit, right? So we don't think that's cost effective. What we want to do, and the strain that's happening on the healthcare system is immense. And so we want to build transitionary or more permanent social housing that we will do, offer balance sheet with other endowments, with other charitable organizations, with other family offices that also want to give back to the city and convey those properties to the city or non-for-profits to operate. And we're going to do that at no cost, no fee to us, right? That's really part of our mission to develop quality housing, again, across the spectrum to help the hardest hit in the cities that we operate in.
Yeah, interesting. So, sorry, I don't know how to do the hand thing here, but anyway, one more question. How you approach debt structuring, given the interest rate environment, and if there's incentives for financing. I don't know if you've got joint ventures going. You must perhaps do with some of these initiatives you were just talking about being used to fund some of these developments.
Yeah, so we're typically doing separate accounts with large institutions with large pension plans, and so we'll typically just put Schedule A construction debt, of let's call it 70%, 75% leverage, And then the rest would be equity from ourselves and our partners. So pretty simple capital structure. As it relates to the social impact strategy, we really, part of unlocking that strategy is getting access to CMHC debt, specifically their accelerated construction loan program, their ACLP program, which is really cost effective. It really helps subsidize the major cost in building, affordable housing, especially when you're breaking 20 or 30%. Those are big numbers. And so it really helps subsidize the cost of doing that.
Yeah, so interesting. So, and does I guess then that rolls into like, and you have to forgive me, I don't know everything about where you are primarily developed, and you spoke about maybe slowly transitioning into Alberta and BC, but do those provincial controls on rent have obviously have an impact on where you think you might want to be, and part of the changes you were speaking of, right, getting everybody in lockstep, and I think that's one of the things too, right, on the provincial controls on some of the rent structures that landlords can have.
Yeah, look, we
I'm in Manitoba. I assume you're not looking to build here, so I know it's a challenging one for developers to come into Manitoba on the rental side.
Yeah. We haven't for other reasons, but definitely any form of rent control restricts the ability to actually develop. It's very risky, very costly to develop. And so when there's, significant inflation in the market, what is helpful is to offset that, that with your ability to have rent offsets that kind of work lockstep with inflation. And so it's very, very difficult to be entering in a market where your top line revenue is really constrained and the entire liability, all the risk is passed on to the developer and any investor that's in that project. It's very, very difficult. We think that's an anti kind of new development regime that, cities should stay away from, provinces should stay away from it. Every time they introduced it in Toronto, you saw, or Ontario, a big drop off in new supply. If you look at the significant amount of new supply that was being created in 1950s, 60s, up to 1975, when rent control got introduced, that was a big drop off, almost off a cliff. When rent control was introduced, and the same thing that came into play in 91 and also in 2018 as well. So we want to be mindful around the regimes around rent control in any city and any geography that we operate in.
Yeah, well, it just speaks to what you were talking about before, right? The need for policy to change, not just provincially, but municipally and federally. Like assistance can come from various places.
Yeah, we think the affordability crisis is solved through new supply. So any policy that can be introduced that encourages as much new supply coming in the market, we are very much in favor of. Anything around new taxes and government levies that take away from that policy, we obviously don't support. We don't think it's the right thing. We need to create an economic model and an environment in Canada, not just within real estate or the residential sector, but more broadly, which encourages as much institutional and global capital coming into the Canadian market. This is a multi-trillion-dollar program problem that we have to build all this new housing that's required given the immigration and natural household formation that we have. And so we need to find ways to create an environment where people want to invest in Canada. Again, that goes over and above just residential rental. That is about entrepreneurship, that's tech, that's in lots of different sectors. And unfortunately, over the last couple of years, especially the last 12 months, we actually cut across that in a big way with some of the tax policy that was introduced by the Liberal government.
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks, Robin, for joining. Adrian Robin is our national president of our board, so thanks for taking time out of your day. So I guess parting thoughts, maybe 4:45. We'll hand the mic back to you one last time. So maybe we like to end our sort of chats with a call to action, or if there's something that you think that the Real Estate Institute of Canada can do, if there's things that you think that we should play a part in supporting or joining a conversation, what's the ask? What do you got? What's our homework you got for us?
I would reach out to all three levels of government and get them to rethink the economic model. And really, it's times like this where strong leadership needs to be strong, and people need to step up and do the right thing. And you can't lead being on the sidelines and waiting for, things, the world, life to come to them. You really have to stick your neck out. You're not going to be, everyone's your biggest fan, but that's okay. And that's the reality of strong leadership. And so we need people to see what's happening day to day on the ground in terms of new supply and what we have in 12 to 18 months. Fast forward through the amount of supply, especially in Toronto, that we're dealing with in the market, and look through that and see that we actually have a real proper crisis. It's beyond a crisis. It's turning into a catastrophe. And so how do you change that? And the more people could speak up and lead and be vocal around that change, the better. We are obviously very active, very vocal lobbying, in private meetings, publicly, through the media. And the more we could do that collectively as an industry, the better.
Yeah, and just have the conversation, right? And just not shy away from it. So I agree with you that, making the tough decisions is leadership, but that's the point of it. If everything was easy, everybody would do it. So thanks, Adrian, for your time. Of course, super insightful. Love your talks, love your background, love Fitzrovia, the amazing things that you guys are doing. There's no doubt in my mind that you guys are going to continue to do amazing things and lead this market. All of my membership will pass this out to everybody so they can all get caught up. I'll connect them back to you guys if they wanted to reach out to you. Well, we'll connect them through if you can coordinate with Amber some contact information so that we can track you down. But expect that we'll follow you. We'll keep part of the conversation and look forward to seeing the exciting things that you're doing for not just the rental landscape, but also the housing landscape and for Canada. So appreciate it. Bye, everybody.